Yeah, what I like about Thomas Muller, and you see it in this game, like he wins player of the match, scores a hat trick, he brings home the match ball, he wins player of the week in MLS, all these accolades. But it wasn't necessarily like a dominant Thomas Muller performance, right? It wasn't necessarily a game where you look at like Thomas Muller carried his team to victory. Because with Thomas Muller, I think what you realize, which is kind of cool when you with how he plays, a lot of stars, like a lot of especially star attacking midfielder number 10s, everything goes to them. Ball touches, everything's running through. I mean, Messi is the prime example. When you watch him play, it's just he is the center of attraction for everyone. But with Thomas Muller, everything goes through him and nothing goes through him at the same time, right? Because like that's he finds the space. And I think what's fascinating is in a game like this, just him being there, it opens up a little more space for an Ali Ahmed, a little more space for Emmanuel Sabbi. But then it's not like the Whitecaps. I think that's what's really fascinating to see the difference between the 2 weeks of Muller starting versus St. Louis and Muller starting versus Philadelphia. Against St. Louis, I think out of habit with a player like that, they tried to run too much through Thomas Muller. They're like, oh, he's there. Let's just feed him the ball constantly, have everything play through. And it didn't work as much because that's not his game. And I think that's where that 2 weeks of training really paid off because they realized everything can go through Thomas Muller, but not everything has to go through Thomas Muller. And for him, it's little subtle details like he'll show into a pocket, but he doesn't need the ball. He'll make a run over the top, but he doesn't need the ball. And a lot of superstars, you see that, right? They do those things and they get visibly angry when they don't get the ball and everything has to go through them. And I think the Whitecaps found a great balance. Whereas if you're Ali Ahmed, you're just like, all right, I know I just have to run down the line, cross in the box, and things will be there. If you're Emmanuel Sabbi, it's okay. I have to find the space in the box and just get there, be open, be ready to finish. If I'm Daniel Rios, who has a quiet game, but at the end of the day, when you're leading the line and your team scores 7 goals, you're not going to care. It's okay. How can I disrupt the back line so that Thomas Muller can have extra space? And I think it's really cool that it hasn't taken long for the Whitecaps to realize how to utilize Thomas Muller. And I think that's what makes this so unique is that with all the weapons they have, it doesn't look like any of them's going to suffer. Sometimes you see that, right? When a big star comes in, some of these players suffer because of how it plays. Thomas Muller's not going to do that. And when you consider the weapons the Whitecap have and then their disposal, I think that shows why this move has made so much sense for them.
I wonder if, do you think that Whitecaps actually knew that? Do you think they actually knew? Because I don't know if we would know that from observing Bayern, that he would be that way. Particularly in the last year and under Company, where he became this super sub, and you could tell he was a team guy in that, but that's not the type of environment I think where you could discern this person's character in this setting now in MLS with a mixed bag where you have a handful of internationals, many of whom are very, very young and inexperienced. You've got a couple of guys with, MLS experience and, Galden White, you would say all-stars, Berhalter, a becoming international, but still a very young, inexperienced team that someone like that would come in with as much, I don't want to say grace, but you could tell that he is really enjoying life. He really seems like he's enjoying everything about this. And everyone feeds off of that. And all of those young players seem to really feed off of that. And I think you can already see there's a handful of guys that are playing to a level that either the Whitecaps had hoped they could reach, like a ceiling, and maybe that's the new floor, like Emmanuel Sabbi. That what we've seen from Emmanuel Sabbi in the last month is exactly what the Whitecaps had hoped that they were getting. But there wasn't enough of a sample size to believe that you could get that consistently, or that you could that was sustainable. Those flashes that he showed in France, you're getting that now from him. And Daniel Rios is exactly what they needed and wanted from Damir Kreilach, I think.
Yeah, I would tend to agree, but also Thomas Müller has had hints of this throughout his career, whether it's with Germany and Bayern Munich. We knew, and I think the Whitecaps would have known that he was going to be a leader coming into this team. There's a story I recall when Joshua Kimmich was breaking into the Bayern squad, and they won a game. I forget who it was against, and then they go into the locker room, and there's no music, there's no partying, there's no nothing, right? So he leans over to Thomas Müller. I forget exactly who reported this story or where he heard it. So he leans over to Thomas Müller. He says, "Why isn't there a party? Why isn't there? We won a game." And Thomas Müller said, "Well, that's our job at Bayern Munich. We win a game so you can have some ice cream later in the week." And so that's the kind of mentorship that Thomas Müller brings to a team like the Whitecaps. They haven't lost with him yet, but the expectation is they win games and they control games in a way that they haven't necessarily done before. But with that kind of leadership and mentality, he's bringing those players like an Ali Ahmed, like a Sebastian Berhalter, who I think we've seen a lot better play with Muller in that midfield than we've seen from him prior. And prior, he was exceptional in breaking into that U.S. men's national team as well. And players like Emmanuel Sabi, who needed that extra little push. And I think Thomas Müller is bringing that push, whether it's as direct as we need to win so we can have a little bit of ice cream midweek, or, a little bit more indirect by just his sort of feeling on the training pitch, Alex.
Well, maybe being out of Germany, boys, is allowing him to have a bit more fun doing it, because it looks like he's having a lot more fun. And if I was in that room, I would say, the hell with the ice cream. Let's go get those Granville Island donuts that everybody overpays for and stands in line for. That's what I would want. I'm having a sweet treat.
The Lees, the classic Lees. But no, it's 100% correct though, because I mean, at Bayern Munich, you lose, it's like all the newspapers are out in full force. You're leading the news that night, like, oh my goodness, they lost to X team, even if it's like a great team. Mm-hmm. Vancouver, you're not getting, the province isn't running a full page front like, oh, the Whitecaps lost to St. Louis, pack it in. So maybe there is a bit of laughter that he's escaped the bubble to that extent. But I think we also, to your point, Brendan, earlier, like, I think we saw this at Bayern, and I think that's been, you see it over the last 10 years, how they've struggled with the idea that while it's looked like he's declined just because he isn't the most physically capable guy, they've just not been able to drop him out of their team. Like, every time they try, within a few weeks, like, oh yeah, we have to put this guy in. And I think that's what's so fascinating, is because if you look across his era at Bayern Munich, like, there's no doubt that he's a great player. But when you look at each individual team, like, there's a lot of guys who kind of always stole the shine. In the early 2010s, mm-hmm. You got the Robin Ribéry, duos. It was the robbery duo. And then you go into the mid 2010s and Lewandowski comes in and is an absolute superstar. And even as he leaves, Harry Kane steps up in the mantle. There's guys like Elise as he leaves. There's been Serge Gnabry, Kingsley Coman, Joshua Kimmich. There's that season where Leon Goretzka was unstoppable. Yeah. Yet Thomas Müller was kind of the one constant who fit into it all, who elevated a lot of those guys. And I think the Whitecaps are starting to see that's, I think, again, you'll ask a lot of Germans about the greatness of Müller. It's not as tangible to see. And I think that's what's, again, made it so fascinating, is because that the Whitecaps are starting to really understand, oh yeah, like, it is, there's so many intangibles that happen on and off the field that you don't see unless you're there every day and you're playing with them. And the quick turnaround exemplifies that. And
of course, the win against Philadelphia also puts the Whitecaps in the Supporters' Shield conversation, and remaining in the Supporters' Shield conversation, in a race that has been exceptionally tight this season in MLS. They do beat Forge 4-0 to get to the Canadian Championship final as well, but they lose Tristan Blackman. So my question to you, Brendan, is, are they out of the Supporters' Shield race if they don't have Tristan Blackman for the next little while?
What's the timeline for the new additions, the German and the Belgian?
End of September, I think, for both of them is what's been thrown out there.
I would hope that they can come in, like Toronto FC have had some success with this, particularly in the past, where they, in integrating guys who have come from a higher level, that adjustment period can be short. Like, I feel like, and it's hard to say because TFC have been bad for a while, but like Kevin Long got like thrown right into the mix and like held down the spot. You can just see there's like a difference in quality. That position specifically, more so than other positions on the pitch. So having those bodies, coming back, as daunting as it is that they're only being integrated into the squad at the end of the season, it does feel like that everybody involved in Jesper Sorens's team is in with what's going on, even if we're not seeing them in action on the pitch. So I hope that those guys can get a big jump. I don't think that it will derail their MLS Cup hopes or their Supporters' Shield chances. But man, they feel cursed at center back. Like, it sucks. I would say if you had to lose a player for the rest of the season, you'd hate to make a list about it, but you probably would have picked 9 guys that you'd be more comfortable losing than him, I think, right? So it's unfortunate, but I do think they'll be okay, that there's enough cover in there and enough depth. I think Alex said, like, it's not going to totally derail them.
You just do worry, because I think you could lose one of Ranko Veselinovic and Tristan Blackman, but now they've lost both. I mean, we don't know how long Blackman could be out. Knees are funny. He could be fine for the weekend. It's just, it didn't look good. We don't have an update at the time. It's hard to think. It's it's anything short term, but we'll see. Just losing both, especially how crucial they are to the system. Like, I think you've seen it with Veselinovic now out for almost 2 months. Like, they're only finally starting to get back up to speed defensively on the ball. Bilal Halbouni had a bit of a slower transition phase as he's integrated into a bigger role. Of course, we know how Bjorn Inge Utvik struggled to the point where, he's no longer with the club as he went back home. Blackman, I think, would be such a massive loss. The only thing that the Whitecaps do have in their favor, Brendan, if the new guys can integrate up to speed, the schedule is nice. It's not great because they have a bunch of games to make up from Champions Cup and Orlando and all that. But I'm looking at their last 6 MLS games. It's KC, Portland, Seattle, San Jose, Orlando, Dallas. Of those, like, Seattle's the one I'm looking at, 'cause they're pushing for near the top of the West. Every other team is either out of the playoff race. Orlando is better than I think their record indicates because they're in 7th, but still, Ben can tell you about it. They're so inconsistent this year. So that's the one thing. They have a easier schedule. If that allows them to integrate the new guys in, then maybe that's the silver lining, that they can at least peak towards the playoffs while still making a push for the Shield. Because at the end of the day, I think this Whitecaps team is more MLS Cup oriented than the Shield. But the fact that they have this chance for the Shield, I'd say go for it, because I think it would do worlds of confidence to lift a trophy other than the Canadian Championship, which is of course still on the line for them, to understand what that feels like.
The Shield is definitely within reach for this Whitecaps team. And RotoWire has this great system where they rank strength of schedule for all MLS teams. And Inter Miami has the easiest schedule, but then you could push against that and say, maybe these guys verging on 40 can't play 9 games in 21 days, even though they managed to beat the Seattle Sounders in a Leagues Cup rematch on the same night the Whitecaps beat Forge in the Canadian Championship. But the Whitecaps...
Is that the fixture list for Miami, though? 9 games in 21 days?
That's what it is.
Absurd.
They have
already got guys suspended with,
but
9 league games.
9 league games. But if you were to pick out the opponents and think of which opponents might be easiest, you might put together this fixture list. They have
TFC and they have Montreal again, right?
They have TFC, they have New England, they have Chicago, they have Atlanta. They end against Nashville, who hasn't been very good and is probably looking at US Open Cup a little bit more seriously.
Yeah, seriously.
It's a winnable schedule for Miami. So they're in this Supporter Shield conversation, but the Whitecaps have the 4th easiest schedule according to this metric. LAFC and Real Salt Lake only teams above them in that. So
you love that geeky shit, eh? How much?
I love it.
Like, of course,
I love the way the smile lights up. Like, strength of schedule. Let's go.
My excitement when I found that metric was through the roof. So the Whitecaps have a chance at the Supporters Shield, and of course they have a chance at MLS Cup as well. But they're through to the Canadian Championship final. Do you think they can get a 4th Canadian Championship and set a record for most consecutive Canadian Championship titles? Maybe it's against Vancouver FC or Atletico Ottawa, Brendan.
I mean, shit. If it's against Vancouver FC, the goal line betting odds will be 6.5. Like, I don't think Vancouver FC stands a chance against them, even in a final. And I don't mean that disrespectfully, but the gap is insane. Atletico Ottawa better than Forge? I would argue not. I think that they're good. I think that they might be real CPL title contenders. I know that Forge haven't necessarily been consistently dominant all season long, but you wouldn't bet against Forge in cups, and you don't get a bet against Forge in the CPL playoffs, certainly. So yeah, I think this feels like one of those, you can just give them the trophy. I don't see a scenario where the Whitecaps are not lifting their 4th straight Canadian Championship.
Yeah, I think this Forge game was a real reminder from the Whitecaps. Like, they rotated their squad. They played a Forge team. We have to remember that since I guess April, they've lost twice. And that includes games against CF Montreal. That includes all these CPL games. They've lost twice, and they've both come recently. The fact that the Whitecaps outclassed them as thoroughly as they did, the numbers show how one-sided it was. I mean, this is the Whitecaps trophy to lose. It's been their trophy to lose since day one, but I think that was before we even knew how good they were. So yeah, for the other teams, the one good news is you head into this, you literally have nothing to lose, literally, because the Whitecap, and it's interesting. Jesper Sorensen actually talked a lot about that in his post match, because someone kind of put out a question do you almost take it for granted that you're so close to a trophy? And Jesper's no, these teams are going to have nothing to lose. But look, let's be real. The Whitecaps are the 99% favorites heading into this game. I guess it's also one game. one games do make a bit of a difference. So we'll have to see. But definitely, if you're Atletico Ottawa, Vancouver, they're going to have to do a lot to try and find a game plan that works with the Whitecaps, because there's no easy answer with this team. Again, like old Whitecaps teams, you could sit back and frustrate them. But if you sit back against this Whitecaps team, they love to break down low blocks. But if you play high, like Forge did a bit, they have speed to kill you in transition. They're good defensively. Like they're good in all phases of the game. So there's no easy answer of how do you attack the Whitecaps right now either.